Okay, is that working now? Is that better?
We can prop that up.
Okay. We have people that have come here from very, very far away, as well as I know a lot of you came from all over the Bay Area, and that alone is a effort. But we have somebody who came from St. Kitts and people that have traveled a long, long ways to share this presentation with you, and I want to thank them. And I also want to thank Ranger Eric Stearns and Ranger Stephen and Ranger Wendy and Ranger Benny and all the Rangers who have done a lot to make this event happen. We also, the Oakland Parks Conservancy helped set this up. We've also got our photographer as part of the show, Peter Mertz, who you will see with his work is on the wall, and his website documents, petermertz.com, documents arts and corrections throughout the state for about the past 10 years. Alma Robinson, who just said that, is the head of California Lawyers for the Arts, and they helped bring arts and corrections back after a number of years of it going away from the prisons and the programming. And it's now back in all the prisons and bringing amazing work inside and helping amazing work get created. We also have Lori Brooks, who's head of William James Association. She was ready for it. Going on our 40th year of working in community arts in prisons. I'm Carol Newborg. I'm the program manager of the San Quentin Arts and Corrections Program. And there are actually a lot of guests here that were former students in the program, artists and writers, that will probably be able to share some stories later too. We worked inside to come up with the theme. This is our 4th exhibit here at Alcatraz. And the theme was about families in prisons and the separation and trauma and difficulty that, is one of the side effects of the mass incarceration problem right now. So the artwork addresses that in many personal ways. And the writing from Brothers in Pen also addresses that aspect of the complicated problem with prisons. And you'll see samples of the writing on the wall. And the writing comes out of Brothers in Pen. And I've been so inspired seeing that program, just like I have been in seeing all the artists and the hard work they're doing inside, and the work of growth and transformation that happens through the arts in prison and elsewhere, that just gives me so much hope that we can, as a group and as individuals, change and grow. So I want to introduce Zoe Mullery. Zoe is going to be able to introduce Troy Williams, and Troy will be able to introduce his daughter, Tori, and Watani Stiner. We'll also ask you to introduce your son, Larry, and perhaps some others that are here. Zoe has been teaching creative writing in prison through the William James Association since 1997, and she's been at San Quentin since 1999. She taught prior to that for 9 years in the residential rehab program at Delancey Street. And she says teaching in prison turned out to be the dream job she had never thought to dream about. And Zoe and her daughter Gigi live in San Francisco. And I want to say, whenever we get a new teacher coming to San Quentin, I take them to observe Zoe's class, because there's something happening in that class that goes beyond teaching, and there's a sharing and a community and a growth and challenge, and the work that comes out of there, and the people that go through there and then go on to mentor others as writers. It goes beyond something I can understand. It's really deep and amazing work, and I'm very happy to introduce Zoe Mullery.
Good morning. No, I just do a quick thing to collect any email addresses. Anybody that'd be interested in learning more about the Prison Arts Project, I'm going to pass around a couple of clipboards for you to sign up while this is all unfolding.
Hello. I'm Zoe. I don't want to stand in front of you guys. I don't want to block you. So I'm Zoe. Yeah, I've been teaching at San Quentin for a long time, and I've had the incredible privilege of having many amazing writers in my class and getting to get to know their work over a long period of time, which is just really, for a teacher of writing, that's like the best thing, to see people's work over a long period of time and get to know them, get to know their stories. And between Watani and Troy, who you're going to hear from today, I mean, the amount of stories, the depth of the stories, and interest you'll find in these stories is just phenomenal. So I'm not going to take a long time to talk, because I want to give them maximum amount of time. And I'm going to start with introducing Troy Williams. Troy came into my class in 2007. And it was immediately obvious to me that he was one of those people, he was like the prison renaissance man. He was doing everything possible to do in prison. And when I met him, he was doing film projects, he was creating a radio show, he was acting in Shakespeare plays, he was exploring basically every program and new idea that he could get a hold of inside a prison. And I think if they had offered ballet in prison, maybe he would have tried that. Maybe some harp classes, I don't know. He probably would have tried it. But Troy is just a natural storyteller, natural writer, and he has a passionate sense of justice as well, and a desire to be a force for good in the world. And since he's been out, he's been involved in so many things, receiving awards for journalism, starting a filmmaking company focused on restorative justice stories, and most recently taking a position as the editor of the Bayview newspaper. Yay! So I know from Troy's writing that his relationship with his daughter, Tori, was kind of like a guiding star that got him through a lot of tough times and kept him on course with his life. And so I think it's just really gratifying to me to have Tori here and have them sharing about their relationship and the ways that it was impacted by prison, but also the way that it's been able to flourish. And so without further ado, let me turn you over to Troy.
All right, now I always say I'm not gonna get emotional when I come to these things, but as soon as my daughter's name gets mentioned, I'm like, fight the tears. All right. So this is my daughter Tori, my grandson Byron, and BJ, Brian Jr. and Brian Sr. are sitting right there. So give it up for them. I'm assuming there's going to be a lot of questions, so I'm not quite sure how much time.
Yeah, we'll have some Q&A at the end.
Okay. So I guess I want to start with the theme being connection loss, on how devastating it is to be put away from your family. Albeit, yes, I did some things that I shouldn't have been doing in the process of me trying to provide for my family, and as a result of the things I was doing, I ended up getting myself incarcerated. Right? I take responsibility for the things that I did that led me to prison, and yet and still, prison does not provide for healing. It does not provide for opportunities for families to heal, and it fractures the family even greater than what the family could have been fractured even before a person went to prison. My daughter was 8 years old when I left. I was a single dad after a long back and forth custody thing with her mother, and I was allowed to have custody over her I wanted to guide her education. I wanted her to receive some things that I never had the opportunity to receive growing up. And so that was important to me. But when I went to jail, that was stripped away. I would call home. I remember my daughter was 10 years old, and I would call home and I would be like, you know, where's Tori at? And she would be out. She would be out running around, and I could not, the things she would write me, and she would write me about issues that she would face with. By the time I got her mail, 3 weeks to a month had passed by. By the time I responded to her mail, the extra week that it took, because I would respond to her letters right away. By the time I would respond to her mail, it's an extra couple of days for it to leave the prison and a couple of days for it to travel. So almost like a month and a half at times would go by between issues that she was having as a child growing up. And she's writing, she's trying to seek guidance from her father. And then it just wasn't there. You know, she would write back and I would write her back about issues, and she would write me back like, what are you talking about? Like, that was like back in the day. It was like, back in the day, it was like a month ago, right? For a child, that's a long time to be holding stuff. That's a long time to be faced with a lot of issues and not really having, you know, a male figure around or your father around. And I can only imagine what it was like for her. We talked a lot about, you know, what she went through with me not being there. Yeah, I remember just sitting in the cell knowing that I had to send letters out, as many as I could. So I would always send her a self-addressed stamped envelope. And she had a lot of different addresses when I first met her, because she bounced around a lot. And every time I sent her a letter, she responded, and she would have her new, she learned how to write her return address on the envelope and send it to me. So I always kind of knew where she was at, and that was like our bond. We've always like had this unbreakable bond with each other. Yeah, and just so much time passed by. I remember it took me about maybe 6 years to be able to see her. And I remember she came into the visiting room. My mother brought her in to see me. She was 14 years old, and she let me have it, right? I'm talking, she let me have it. She was cussing, like, you know, yeah. And rightfully so, right? And I knew that I just had to take it. I just had to sit there and listen to her and hear her, and hear what it was that she was going through, and not try to play dad when dad hadn't been there, right? I had to hear her pain. I had to see beyond the words, and see beyond the anger, and see like what it was like for her having to go to school, and other kids' fathers are showing up to events, and yet she has to make excuses about where her dad is at, right? Yeah, so a lot of my writings was often about my daughter. A lot of things that I talked about was often about my daughter. She carried me through a lot, especially early in the beginning, because she carried me a lot throughout my life. And I'll say this because even when I didn't have the ability to love myself, I had the ability to love her. And that helped me through some really dark times. When I couldn't think straight for myself, I knew I had to think as straight as I could for her. So even in prison, there's a lot of things that can take you off in prison, right? Prison is probably one of the most racist, segregated places on the face of this planet. And you don't get to decide whether or not you're involved in activities inside of prison. Something happens, you're white, you look white, you'll be attacked. Something happens, I'm black, I look black. I don't get to say, man, I'm just trying to do my time and go home. When the riot happens on the yard, you put your back to something and you swing and you defend yourself, you do what you have to do. And so I found myself a lot of times hanging out in the law library, really trying to fight my case. A lot of my motivation for even doing that was trying to get back to her, not wanting her to spend the rest of her life without, you know, the things that a dad could give. And early on, I thought a lot of these things was material stuff. And what I found is that the most precious thing on the face of this planet that you can give to your children this time is your presence. I remember she, one year, this was my third time having gone to the Board of Prison hearings, and she wrote a letter to the board, right, asking them to release me. Yeah. She wrote a letter to the board, and here come mine. She wrote a letter to the board asking the board to release me. And I had about 75 people writing letters and pulling for me. By this time, I had created film projects, I had created radio projects, I had founded groups inside the prison, I had participated in a number of self-help programs, and started developing programs. And I remember going into the board and telling the board that my goal was, one of the things you have to have is what they call marketable skills. And I remember going in the board, telling the board that, yeah, I'm a filmmaker. And the board looked at me and was like, yeah, right. Like, yeah, like, you're gonna be a filmmaker, sure. Right? They couldn't believe that I was even on the prison yard making films. That was like beyond what they were used or accustomed to seeing. And long story short, they did not release me. And I remember having to go back and get on the phone, and the first person I called was Tori, and telling her that they weren't releasing me. And I did this radio project about it, but I remember hearing her like trying to, at least this is my story, but at least trying to like sound tough for me. Like, oh, it's gonna be all right, you know, we'll get them next time. And I'm like, yeah, we'll get them. Like, I'm gonna file an appeal, and I'll, you know, by this time I'm a certified paralegal as well. And so I'm like, I'm gonna file my writs, and I'll do all this other stuff. And we're trying to sound like tough with each other on the phone. And she was asking like why? And the why, and I don't think she intended it like this, but I know that a lot of times family assumes, or family can assume because of the environment that we're in, that something has happened, that the board actually has this legitimate reason for not releasing you. And sometimes it's just because of our own inability to explain our transformation, or our own inability to relate to the board in a way that they can understand our transformation, right? When you have people whose backgrounds are totally law enforcement, totally, you know, people who can't identify with a young or a black male coming from the inner city, having undergone the things that I went through in life, it's hard for them to see what transformation actually looks like for us, and to hear what it actually looks like from my lips with the language that I use daily, and not the proper, like, well, yes, I have taken several classes, and I've really transformed my life into an outstanding human being, thank you. Like that doesn't necessarily work. That's not how I talk about transformation. That's not how transformation talks about it. What transformation looks like for us on the prison yard is when we see the young homies doing something, and be like, look, man, let me come holler at you. What the fuck you doing? What you talking about? And that's some dumb shit. What you talking about? You know, having a real conversation like that, that's what real transformation can look like. But I didn't get parole, and so I stopped telling her and my family that I was going to the war, right? Because how many people seen that movie Hurricane Carter? Right? The way Denzel played that role in the movie about wanting to cut everybody off from the outside because it's easier for your own heart to have your own heart hardened than it is to actually make yourself vulnerable to feel all them emotions. That's sort of the way I felt. I didn't want to tell them because I didn't want to see them go through the pain, and I didn't want to see them lose faith in me, right? Because at the end of the day, the board is supposed to, like, if you're not doing things wrong, if you're doing things right, then the board should actually let you go, right? That's the law. And that doesn't happen. So, and when family doesn't see it, because the board is supposed to be this upstanding sort of, you know, for lack of a better term, this filter between public safety and letting incarcerated men and women out of prison, it's kind of hard to see for people outside who don't know all the inside politics to really understand what's going on. And so my 5th time going to the board, I ended up getting a parole date. They gave me a parole date, thankfully. And I gotta say, the only reason I feel like somebody like me, that got a parole date, because I was a bad actor. I'm not a guy. I can't claim innocence. I can't claim I didn't do the things that I did in life and a whole lot more. But for California having gone broke with the tech crisis and the market boom, and people starting to look at where the money was going in California, and Judge Stelton Henderson and the 3-judge panel really taking a close look at what was happening inside of prison, and laws starting to change around that, I have the kind of record where they would have never let me out of prison, right? I can say that they would have never let me out of prison, simply because of my past, not because of my present. So I ended up getting a parole date. I waited till I got in the car. When I got in the car, I borrowed my friend's phone, and I called my daughter, and I'm like, hello? She's like, who is this? I'm like, this your dad. She like, what? I said, I'm home. She said, you better quit playing with me. Who is this? Because I'm finna hang up the phone. Because I had never called her in 18 years. She had never got a phone call from me directly through, straight through. It was always, you have a collect call from San Quentin State Prison. If you choose to accept this call, press 5. If you choose to deny this call, right? So she was like, quit playing with me. And so I'm like, for real, this your dad? And I started to laugh. And that's when she realized it was me. And we had a great conversation. And 2 days later, she called me up, and she was like, I'm glad that I finally get to have a dad now. And so I'm gonna let her take it. I'm gonna let her take it from now.
Hello, this is my first time speaking. Well, in regards to what he was just saying, as a child growing up, it was very, very tough. A lot of the things that I went through, it's very hard to explain what I went through. At some times I had my mother, at some times I didn't. But the fact that I did have a very close relationship with my dad, I needed that more. The things that I went through growing up, that to where I felt like I needed my dad because he was able to explain a lot of the things differently to where I understood, and that's why I needed him. At the times that I could not reach him or was waiting for his letters, I moved around a lot, so it was very, very even harder to even grasp the things that I needed to know alone. But at the end of the day, regardless of what I went through, I feel like I'm not upset about I'm not mad at you, you know? And I told myself I was to go cry because I am at peace, you know? Right just before, I think right just before he got paroled, I had lost a little bit of faith. I was like, he's not getting out, so let me just accept it. And once I did that, when he made that phone call, that's why I thought he was just playing on my phone. I'm like, who is this? He can't be calling me this way, and this must be a joke. I was relieved. I had to think about it when we got off the phone, and I really didn't know. I was still confused. I'm like looking at the phone number, he got a cell phone? You know, I was still confused, and I was able to call him, and once I saw him after he got out, I kept calling him Dad, now I'm about to bother you. You know, you ain't going nowhere, I'm calling your name all day, I'm acting like how my kids act with me. Clingy, and I want this, I want the candy, I want the juice, all the things that I couldn't get, I want it now. So, yeah, but I mean, I'm happy. I'm very happy that he got out. I have another friend of mine whose dad is still incarcerated, did 22 years, still fighting the battle. And I can only imagine what I could possibly still be going through if he was still incarcerated. Now that I can call him directly if I'm having any trouble, you know, I'm very thankful for that. Is there anything else I should mention? No, I don't know. I'm happy, you know, I'm at peace with it. Like I said, I got at peace with it before he got paroled, and then when he got paroled, it just made it much more easier to accept the fact that he was out. And, you know, we're doing good.
So you want me to introduce my time?
I'm going to introduce him.
I want to introduce him.
It's my chance.
Careful to be in front of the speaker. Careful being in front of us.
Okay, I won't stand there. I'm going to stand right here.
Okay.
So there's going to be, I know a lot of you have questions for Tori and Troy, and just please stick around and hold those questions, because we are going to have time for Q&A at the end, and that's always a really rich time, so please be thinking of your questions and holding them. Right now I want to introduce Watani Stiner. I can't give you a quick version of Watani's life because there's just too many chapters, and it just defies summarizing. He's got a memoir coming out like any day now, right, Watani? When's it going to be done? Can I have a public?
This year.
Okay, this year.
Y'all heard it. This year.
He said this year. He's been saying this year for 5 years now, but I think maybe it's getting close. He's been working on his memoir since he joined my class in 2004. He was already writing his memoir, and he's still working on it. There is a version of it that went out, I think in about 2005, a very short version, and it went out to, got put into the research library, into the library at UCLA, and I think it's been utilized in a lot of research projects already. I Googled it once, and I found it referenced in a number of research projects. So it's already out there, but the real version is coming, and it's going to be good. So Watani is a man of deep convictions that don't mean criminal convictions. Watani has wanted to make this world a better place since he was a teenager, and he's been willing to put his life on the line and stand up for himself and stand up for other people so many times. And now that he's out of prison, he's been a sought-after speaker. He speaks at churches and schools and rallies and all kinds of places. And he's become a really good public speaker. Well, he probably already was, but I've noticed him polishing his story as he goes. So just having him out of prison and having him have access to his family and having all of us have access to him is just a beautiful thing. And I feel like he's finally gotten to be fully involved in the dialogue that he was born to be a part of, which is you know, being in the public conversation about making this world a better place. Watani Stiner.
That's it. Thank you, Troy. That was really beautiful and heartwarming. We're going to provide you with a story, my son and I. So first of all, I want to say my name is Watani Stiner. And just 2 years ago, I was a California state prisoner serving a life sentence. And although I spent 26 years behind the walls of San Quentin, the last time that I actually walked the streets of this country prior to those 2 years was in 1969. That's almost 50 years ago. Well, my life began in the Jim Crow South in Houston, Texas. I remember the segregated world that I was born into. The separate water fountains, the back of the bus, the going around to the back door of Mr. Fontenot's grocery store to buy milk and bread for my mother and my grandmother. And I even remember this most vivid image, a segregated beach. Can you imagine that? I remember as a child that they used to have this net that used to separate the white kids from the black. And as a child, I looked across at the net, and it seemed like that net would go all the way across to the other side of the ocean. My brothers and sisters used to get real close to the net, and we used to peek through the holes, and it seemed like to us, at least to me as a child, that those white kids was having so much more fun playing as white than we could ever have as Negroes. I grew up in a Catholic family. And what I believe, what I was taught, is that the only way you get to heaven was to say your prayers, obey God's commandment, and to stay in your place. I was just 7 years old when my mother took us on that Greyhound bus from Houston, Texas to California, straight to Watts, a world far removed from grandmother's praying hands and her protective morality. It was a whole new world in Watts. Now, I was just 17 years old when I married my high school sweetheart. I graduated from high school. I had a well-paying job at a major aircraft company. I used to work at Douglas. And I became the proud father of my first son, Larry Joseph Steiner, Jr. I was well on my way to becoming your typical Huxtable. I was going to be a part of this system, but then something happened. Something happened that would change my life forever. I used to watch on television as the dogs and the water hoses were being turned loose on nonviolent protesters in the South. And the horrible images filled me with rage. I wanted to be a part of a more confrontational movement to end racial discrimination in this country. The voice of Martin Luther King Jr. spoke to me in a whisper, and I disregarded it. The voice of Malcolm X shouted out to me, and I embraced his call for freedom by any means necessary. Forget turning the other cheek. I wanted to meet the oppressor's violence with violence of my own. It was 1965, and there were uprisings all across the country. America was on fire. Yes, I had recently married my high school sweetheart and loved her very much. But I was on a mission. There was a cause that I felt was even bigger than family. A cause that I was truly willing to die for. I was young, I was proud and enraged by the injustices I had witnessed being played out in my neighborhood, my family, and on television against people of color. I desperately wanted to be the sharp tip on the spear of change that pierced the heart of a racist nation. And I would pour myself out passionately to that end. Decades later, I would sadly come to realize and deeply regret that while my commitment to the cause was fierce, the hearts I ended up piercing would be those belonging to my children. As a dedicated member of a Black Power organization called US, founded by Dr. Maulana Karenga, the creator of Kwanzaa, I joined the paramilitary wing and willingly put my life on the line for our cause. I became a young lion. I became a Simba Wachanga. My consciousness about the issues of racism infecting our country and my knowledge of history and global movements grew exponentially as I plunged myself into a crash course of the revolutionary theory and practice. However, unbeknownst to us, the FBI was running a covert intelligence program, COINTELPRO, which had as its stated mission to secretly infiltrate, discredit, disrupt, and destroy groups like ours. COINTELPRO's lethal and illegal manipulations inflamed division between us and the Black Panther Party, which eventually led to a fatal conflict between the two groups on the campus of UCLA. A shootout left me wounded in the shoulders by a Panther's bullet, and 2 Panther leaders shot and killed by an US member. Though my brother and I were unarmed and had never fired a shot, we faced the death penalty, were tried and convicted in a convoluted theory of conspiracy to commit murder, and sentenced to life in prison. After serving 5 years, prompted by sinister threats on our lives by white prison guards, we escaped from San Quentin State Prison. I fled the country to South America, leaving behind my 2 young sons and not knowing when or how I would ever hear or see them again. Their revolutionary father was now a fugitive. I agonized over the impact my incarceration and subsequent fleeing the country would have on my family. I wondered what my children were feeling.
When you thought of your father, it was Daddy, stop teasing. When I thought of my father, it was I hope he's still breathing. I prayed for his safety, prayed he was still living. Grade school having nightmares of my father in state prison. I listened to the whispers, heard what the government said. Mass incarceration, that machine must be fed. Dead was my family structure. There was a war against our kind. Why was 50% of the prison population looking like relatives of mine? Never mind, because I never signed to see my father in that hellhole. Hard time living, life in prison. The design of COINTELPRO. No relationship with Daddy, sadly, that's when the damage was done. Thus, was the life of a revolutionary son. Thus was the life of an inmate's son. When you thought of your father, it was fun, Daddy, fun. When I thought of my father, it was run, Daddy, run. Escape from San Quentin, flee the US of A. If God's good, he'll change the world and we'll be together one day. Or maybe we won't, perhaps this is the end. I'm age 8, contemplating never seeing my father again. My little brother is 6, I wrap my arm around him calmly. Stop crying, Shambhalia, we have to take care of mommy. We're Simba, Wachonga, young lions, remember? We have to be brave like Daddy and don't ever surrender. So what if he's gone and can't watch us grow up? When we graduate, we know he can't show up. When we need advice, we know he can't provide it. I want to cry too, but I've learned how to hide it. Besides, I'm the oldest, so just follow my lead. I'll wipe away your tears and catch every drop of blood that you bleed. Indeed, I was afraid, but played the role of the bravest one. Thus was the life of a revolutionary son. Thus was the life of an inmate's son. When you thought of your father, it was surfboards and smiles. When I thought of my father, it was parole board denials. No burgers and barbecues, just murder charges and falsely accused. Prison escapee with nothing to lose. America's most wanted on the evening news. When you thought of your parents, it was husband and wife. When I thought of my parents, mother raised me, daddy lived a fugitive life. I saw the rise of private prisons. Damn, so much damage was done. Thus was the life of a revolutionary son. Thus was the life of Watani Stiner's son. Thank you.
"20 years and 9 children later, my days living in exile came to an end when I voluntarily surrendered to U.S. authorities and was brought back to America to serve out the remainder of my life sentence in the same prison I had escaped from so long ago. I had made the agonizing decision to surrender in order, I hope, to bring my children back to the U.S. out of the chaos of a failed economy in Suriname. The 2 decades on the run had been both incredible and heartbreaking. Along the way, I would meet and befriend some of the world's most amazing people. I would also learn that the truest form of revolution is the one that takes place in your heart and mind when you are separated from the ones you love most. As I re-entered the walls of San Quentin, I took stock of the challenges before me and counted the cost of the many sacrifices I had made in changing my own consciousness and that of others to fight against racist oppression. I know that it takes these kinds of painful sacrifices on the part of many to undo oppression and change corrupt systems, and I had to be a part of that work. However, I also realized that as I had done many times before, I was once again leaving my children behind. What would become of the 9 young children I was saying goodbye to in South America? What had become of the 2 children I had left behind years ago in America? And what would be my fate, the revolutionary father who never seemed to be there when he was needed most? On the plane back to the U.S., shackled in chains, I noticed a young pregnant woman. Strangely, she made me wonder if my own children would have actually chosen to be born into this unjust world if they had had a choice.
Paranoid fetus. Unborn child scared to live. Help me, Jesus, I am a paranoid fetus. Afraid to leave the womb. This world don't want me here, Black Jesus. From inside my mother's stomach, I could feel the blatant hatred. Buzzard circle before my birth. Because I'm black, have I been snake bit? Angels call, come to the light. But I'm not convinced that this world is sacred. Seen so many black babies blessed with breath, but then death comes in and takes it. Mothers breathe and it's steady increasing. The birth of me is not far away, but if given the choice, I'd stay inside. What worth is life in the end of days? So to God I pray. Heavenly Father, let not the levees of my mother's birth canal be cracked. Let not her water break nor her contractions intensify and start coming painfully back to back. For my wish is to remain where I am at, attached to the placenta, surrounded by the fluids that comfort me within the amniotic sac. And mother, where's my father at? Does he know how close you are? Has he proceeded to grab the already prepared hospital bag and placed it upon the back seat of the car? The journey is not far, but we're traveling fast. Mama's feeling quite nauseous. Daddy's stepping hard upon the gas. Whoa, Daddy, don't you run that red light. I know I've got to come, but I don't want to come tonight. Besides, what's the rush when we're in the last days? The world's full of suicide, homicide, and rape. The world's full of genocide, apartheid, and hate. The world's full of stereotypes, parasites, and snakes. That's why I am a paranoid fetus. That unborn child scared to live. Help me, Jesus, I am a paranoid fetus. Afraid to leave the womb, this world don't want me here, Black Jesus. From inside my mother's stomach, I can feel outside aggression. Maggots cry for my demise. If I'm born alive, will I suffer depression? The angels call, come to the light, but I'm not convinced that this world will love me. Seen so many black brothers jailed this year, I don't want no cop to cuff me. Seen so many black bodies drop this year, I don't trust nobody but me. Seen so many black babies hurt this year, I just want my God to hug me. Cervix dilated 8 centimeters wide. I fight against the birth as I feel myself slide. Doctor, stand back with your mask and your gloves on. Don't deliver me until the guns and the drugs are gone. Life is not a love song. My people sing the blues. Another brother murdered. See the footage on the news. Priest abusing children. Child molesting someone's son. That's why I've been feeling nervous since trimester #1. Mama, I don't want to come. Please don't push me out tonight. I know you and Dad will love me, but this world ain't spinning right. Terrorism, deep racism, anti-intellectualism, separatism, phony religion, intolerance for individualism. I've made my decision. I don't want to be born. Mama, stop pushing. I don't want to be born. Doctor, stop pulling. I don't want to be born. And Daddy, please stop cheering. I don't want to be born. Too late. I've already been born. I'm breathing on my own. I've already been born. Umbilical cord cut. I've already been born. Laying on my mother's chest. I've already been born. Young, gifted, and black. I've already been born. And since it was God who insisted I be born, perhaps I was born to help change the world.
"2017, I'm released from prison, back into a world that was far different than when I had left almost 5 decades ago. I had thought that the most difficult challenge I would face upon my return was the technology. No, that is, the cell phones and the computers. But I quickly found out that the greatest challenge I faced was the challenge in my relationships with my children. You see, I was not there for my children's birthday. I was not there for their graduations. I was not there for their marriages. I was not there for the births of my grandchildren. And I was not even there to scare their conniving little boyfriends. I'm sure my son, who has 2 daughters of his own, can put my feelings into spoken words.
Two of my sisters are here today, Latanya and Lula. And like my father indicated, I do have 2 daughters of my own, so. Daddy's baby girl. Daddy's very precious baby girl. All grown up but still my pearl, you remain the axis upon which forever spins my entire world. I am wild by the memories of you as a child. In fact, my mind constantly rewinds the mental movies of you and the things that you would do to make me laugh and make me smile. You were then, as you are now, the vital valve to that miracle muscle that pumps in my chest. Yes, you are Daddy's heart. And that's why the sadness I see in your eyes right now is completely tearing your daddy apart. No, don't turn away. Please look me in my face and tell me everything with you is all right. And if it's not all right, tell Daddy was wrong, and I promise you, a change gonna come tonight. Now, was it an argument or a fight? A discussion or a disagreement? Did he call you out of your name, and is he really the one you'd want to be with? Did he get mad and raise his voice? Worse than that, did he raise his hand? The silent treatment won't solve this issue, and don't you lie to me to protect that man. You are Daddy's baby girl. Daddy's very precious baby girl. All grown up but still my pearl, and you remain the light of the moon forever illuminating your daddy's world. Remember that Cinderella dress and the way you do that cute little twirl? Those tiny white patent leather shoes, the Bobby socks, and the way you shake that beautiful head full of curls. My angel then, my angel now, I'd sacrifice life to permanently remove your frown. You see these men, they come and go, but it's your daddy and your God who will always be around. Tell me now, what happened to you before I walked into your residence? Was his declaration of love for you delivered with the slightest bit of hesitance? Did he forget whose daughter you were? Did he forget your maiden name? Did he forget that your father would come for him with the force of a ferocious hurricane? See, my aim is not to interfere. I trust your judgment, I truly do. But it's hard for me to stand by and watch when I know that something is bothering you. You are Daddy's baby girl. Daddy's very precious baby girl. All grown up but still my pearl, and you remain the jasmine flower forever blooming in your daddy's world. Born as a princess, matured into a queen, grew up to be one of the most magnificent human beings my eyes have ever seen. Some would say I'm biased and my point of view is not objective, but I stand by what I say and I don't apologize for being overprotective. You're a diamond. You are treasured, a pearl, and should always be treated as such. And if any man should harm you, his ashes to ashes and his dust to dust. What do you mean I have it twisted? What do you mean I have it wrong? What do you mean he makes you joyful when you love your happy home? What do you mean he reads you scriptures? What do you mean he prays with you? What do you mean that he was promised in the name of God to spend all of his days with you? What do you mean that you are pregnant? What do you mean you're having a son? Well, I guess I should be happy and I should put away my gun. Congratulations, baby girl. I always knew God would send you the right guy.
My son did help to change the world for 6 of his siblings he had never seen before by caring for them until my release from prison. As for me, I was willing to sacrifice my freedom and come back to prison only because I loved my children more than I hated my incarceration. Larry Joseph Stiner, Jr. Lionel Ray Chamalier, may he rest in peace. Kikanza, Lula, Raul, I got more. Raul, Kishana, Latanya, yes, I got it. Natisha, Tamani, Lige, and M2. I saw Obama do it, so I thought
Did you want to have time?
Yeah.
Break.
No, it's where it's still on. I should be sitting there.
So we're going to have a time for,
Nothing to do.
we're going to have a time for Q&A.
I know. I just have to say, somebody has my bag in here. I didn't make it up here. I gave it to somebody when I was carrying the baby. My phone's in it. I'm gonna dial it.
Is it backpack? Or is that backpack right there?
No, that's mine.
That's not it. It's a black bag with a pink inlining. It's 145 897 7570. So I thought I'm very sorry, but I need it. It's got all my everything in it. It has a phone too. So
Someone here reading?
no.
No reception.
No reception.
Okay.
Reception right here kind of soft.
I just told my friends. I'm sorry. Namaste.
All right, so we're going to have a time for Q&A. I'll be right back. Yeah, go ahead, Karen.
Because we're not going to be able to pass the mic out here, so you're really, really.
So just, stand up and speak up your question. Does someone have a question for either or all of these guys? Question? Yeah.
Well, you were involved in a lot of artistic programs. What is the relationship of art to your transformation, to your recovery, to your reentry? How do we make art more functional for people that need to reenter into society and they contribute to? Obviously, you can speak, and that's an important thing. You mentioned the fact that you need to be able to tell your truth to people in a way that they understand. I thought it was an excellent story about going to the board. What did you get from that participation?
When you're talking about art, are you talking about painting art or just...
Well, I like writing a lot, so speaking a lot.
Hello?
Creative writing.
Maybe recap the question.
Yeah, so he's asking what is basically the role of arts in our re-entry into society.
Yeah.
Right? So I'll say this is that one of the things about being in the creative writing class, and as Zoe said, I've performed Shakespeare and a lot of other different things, is that when you write, you have to absolutely sit down and think about the characters that you write. You have to give life to these characters, right? Which means in order to give life to a character, you have to understand a little something about human interactions. And when you start to understand human interactions, you have to draw on stories. So you draw on stories from your own interactions with other humans. And then you start to construct how you want these interactions to happen in your script, right? Or in your story or whatever that you're writing. And when I realized, for me, when I realized that I could construct these scripts on this page, I then realized that I could construct my interactions with humans in my real life, right? So it's not just about what you're writing on a piece of paper, but it's about how you're interacting with each human being, right? And it's amazing how one of the things about creative writing is that based on how you write, you can take one moment at a time and slow it down and write. You know, I could write a novel about the past 5 minutes, right? About all the things that go through my mind and everything else about the past 5 minutes, or I can speed up time. So you actually get to manipulate and speed up time. The thing about Shakespeare is that, you know, who can read, who understood Shakespeare, right? Like it's all of this stuff on a paper and you have to give life to it. You have to give emotion to it, which means you have to understand about emotions in your life. And when I started to understand about how my emotions were working on to give them to these words that are on a sheet of paper that I understood nothing about, I could then turn around and look at my own emotions and how my own emotions would lead me to certain behaviors that cause certain reactions just as they would happen on stage. Right? I remember one of our plays, I'll get this to Watani right now, but one of our plays, one guy walked up to me, he said, I didn't understand nothing y'all said, but I felt everything. Right? And that's what we react to. We react to our feelings. You can walk by me. How many times we look at somebody and I can say the baddest curse word to you, but if I say it with a smile, I can make you laugh. Right? Emotions.
Yeah, I'm all right on the same line. With creative writing has been my salvation. Because when I came back after the government reneged on our agreement, I'm locked up in prison, maybe do another 21 years because he still was mad because I left without permission. And so when I got back, I just started writing. I was writing the government. Every day was out of anger. And then I enrolled in the Zoe's class, which was a major trying. Well, we had a struggle because Zoe's she's writing all these old annoying little comments in my writing. This little white girl who we got question what I'm doing. But she got me to start peeling back the layers in my story. And as Troy spoke about, I started to introduce me to characters. And once you started introducing characters, if you ask one question from one character, then the other side of the character has to provide the answer. So it allowed me to get into my own humanity, because it also led me to restorative justice. Vanya Davis came to San Quentin one time, had a workshop, and I decided someone invited me to come in there, and I decided I was going to listen. And I got really inspired by this whole concept of restorative justice and who's involved and who's at stake and the whole question about the community. And by doing that, it caused me to go to up to Vanya Davis. Well, let me say one thing. The person, when I was at UCLA, there was a shootout at UCLA. I was wounded and 2 people were killed. John Jerome Huggins and Al Prentice Bunty Carter. Now, Erica Huggins is the wife of one of the men, the Panthers, who was killed at UCLA, And she had a 3-week-old baby at the time. And I've always turned this in my mind. I wonder what kind of questions that daughter would ask the mother about her father, who was not there when she needed him or when she wanted. And at the same time, I was separated from my own children. I was not there when they needed me. I wasn't there for none of their birthdays or any of the important events. So they were out of my life, so that was a connection there. So in writing that story, it allowed me to go up to Vanya during that particular time and asking her if she think that Erica Huggins, the wife of the man who was killed, would want to engage in a restorative justice dialogue, conversation with me. And that could only come about through my writing, because the writing allowed me to look into my humanity and to connect with other people's suffering. And so we started corresponding for 3 years. She agreed to talk. She came inside of San Quentin. I'm gonna speed this up. She came into San Quentin. We had a face-to-face for 5 hours about what was going on in the world, about young people, about how can we pass the historical baton on to the young people. Not just the glorification of the 60s, but also some of the mistakes we made. And through that, she's also come inside of San Quentin, and we had a restorative justice symposium there where we addressed the prison population, we modeled what truth and reconciliation. Now I was apologizing for that, not for anything I did, because I didn't fire a shot and I didn't do anything. I was apologizing because I felt responsible, because I was part of an atmosphere that caused the death of 2 human beings. So I took responsibility in that. So writing, if I answer your question real quickly, writing was the way that was my salvation in prison, and it allowed me to connect, like most of the art. Some people find it through their painting, some find it through Shakespeare and other arts, but I found it mine through writing. Thank you.
What about you two? Do you have any thing to say about how obviously you're a writer, so I'm just curious what your work has brought to your healing, or whatever you want to say.
Okay, well, actually, my love for writing came from, believe it or not, the prison letters that I received from my father at a very, very young age. To me, his letters were more interesting than anything I was reading in school or anywhere else. I looked at it as poetry, so that inspired me to want to write. And then, of course, later, through his stories and him writing through Zoe's program, it allowed me to really get to know him, because he was putting his own life on paper. And I was never there to see that or really know other than the stories I hear from others. So writing definitely has created that connection between he and I. So yeah, I think that's very important.
not a writer. No comment.
Didn't you just graduate a year ago in psychology from Chapman?
Graduated from East Coast College. I have a alcohol and drug certification. I also have a mental health certification. I just graduated in May with a substance abuse counseling degree and associate. I intend to go back for my bachelor's in behavioral science in September. If everything works out.
Very good.